You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday, the 11th of May. Woman arrested on suspicion of murder in death of 5 children in house fire. Labour MP has said that police cannot do their jobs for fear of being labelled racist. Unite Union stands firm behind Labour and the Muslims on trial. Nick Griffin reporting from the belly of the beast. Naked Griffin chased by badger. Islamic fundamentalists bring suicide bombs to Syria. Leftist propaganda at work in the US. Romney accused of bullying gays at school. Thought for the day, public workers' protests and the one protest they should have been attending. UK News. It has been reported that the father of the 5 children killed in a house fire in Derby is Mick Philpott. Mr Philpott, who had previously made news for having his wife and mistress live under the same roof. The 54-year-old had also demanded a bigger council house. The reason given was that he had 2 women and 17 children in a 3-bed semi. The identification was made locally as police revealed that a woman in her 20s had been arrested at a separate address on suspicion of murder after a house fire that started in the early hours of the morning claimed 5 children's lives. Fire crews were at the scene within 3 minutes of being called and managed to rescue all 8 members of the family, but the children died of smoke inhalation. Police are reported to be keeping an open mind over the cause of the accident, but have made the arrest in order to secure evidence. The unfortunate word racist is raising its head again in connection with our police force. It was reported that former Labour MP Anne Cryer has said in tabloids that the police couldn't do their job because of racism fears. She was speaking in connection with the trial and sentencing of the Liverpool 9, a Muslim sex grooming gang who have been on trial at Liverpool Crown Court. This has been given as the reason why no action has been taken over previous reports of grooming reported to the police. This means in reality that any intervention by our police on this particular Muslim crime would be taken as a racist act against their human rights. A World at 8 reporter commented, "This being so, what is the act called when these crimes are perpetrated on non-Muslims? Is it a religious crime or a racist one? Does this mean that these crimes against these children will now slip back into silence as they have been for 30-odd years? Where are the human rights of these children? Never has an invented word changed the morals and principles of any one country so much for the worst as this word invented by a Jewish communist." The Unite Union decides to secretly gather near the Dock Road area of Liverpool on the day of the sentencing, around 500 yards up a side street, chatting with police officers with their red flags flying high in the air. They seem to be united in their demonstrations against nationalists and their supporters outside the court. A World at 8 reporter stated that unions should do what they do best, disorganise a country, and should not be seen supporting Muslim paedophiles in their crimes against humanity. There now follows the Euro News with Nick Griffin MEP.
I'm recording this for you just before going into a mammoth voting session in Parliament on Thursday. We'll be voting on 43 reports, signing off the 2010 budget figures, plus a dozen other reports, including many hundreds of amendments, all in not much more than an hour. That means showing hands and pressing the electronic buttons to vote yes, no or abstain at such a rate that there's not a single one of the 700-odd MEPs, and some of them are very odd, in the place who has the faintest idea of what we're voting on, except the final vote on each report. In Westminster, the party leaders have to set their whips on the backbenchers to get them to vote the right way. In Europe, no one is whipped. There is a persistent rumour of a special house where Tory and UKIP ex-public schoolboys can go if they really feel the need for a good caning. Instead, they simply give us huge blocks of amendments just a few hours before the votes, and then often change the order they're in, so they all have to be transferred onto new voting lists. It's chaos. As a result, the MEPs of the main parties don't even look at the issues. They simply file into the chamber and sit, and then they watch one of their party bigwigs down at the front. If he holds his thumb up, they vote yes. If down, it's a no. There's no time to think. No need to think. Just do as you're told and never mind the voters. Not being part of a big bloc, I rely largely on Simon Darby, who meticulously goes through every line of every proposed amendment and assesses whether it's good, or often just less bad, than the original text for ordinary people in Britain. Does it hasten the cancerous progress of ever greater union, or does it in some way delay it? I'm very happy to be advised how to vote on the basis of those simple criteria. Whenever something comes up that's particularly delicate or complicated, we have a brief telephone discussion about it. Then Simon sends me the voting list, and in I go. Whenever we cast an electronic vote, a colour-code map of the chamber flashes up on the main screens to show who voted which way. Despite coming from so many different countries, the various nationalists and Euro-realists quite often have a similar voting pattern, although local national interest means that it isn't a foregone conclusion. On social issues, the nationalist vote tends to be not so dissimilar to those of the Christian Democrat types who sit just towards the centre from us. On economic matters, such as this week's vote on the attempt by greedy corporations to patent living organisms and seeds, our votes quite often chime with those of the far left, on the other side of the chamber. Very occasionally, a vote is so evenly balanced that mine is enough to save the unfortunate taxpayer being screwed by one crazy scheme or another. That's always satisfying, but the trouble is there's always another one waiting in the wings. Believe you me, the sooner Britain is unshackled from the dying Leviathan that is now the European Union, the better. It's now pretty clear that the Greeks will refuse to go along with being crucified by the single currency for much longer, and will get thrown out. Attention will then shift rapidly to Italy and Spain, where they are much more likely to leave of their own accord than wait to be publicly humiliated by a gang of unelected German banksters and looted by their corporate cronies. It's too early to be a safe bet yet, but there is now a real possibility that the whole EU project could simply collapse under the weight of its own impossibility. Speed the day. Wednesday was hectic in a different way. Journalists crawling all over me. One radio and 2 TV interviews at the International Press Centre, a few minutes walk away past the Commission building, into which, by the way, mere MEPs are not permitted to go. Having a sort of democratic mandate seems to disqualify us from going where the power really lies. Then 2 more interviews for British TV news programmes in the media section of the Parliament itself, plus various phone calls from assorted newspapers. Reports from back in the UK through the day and the evening confirm that we had a huge amount of great publicity, reminding millions of people that the Muslim grooming menace was something that we helped get out into the open. Even the strange and hugely sensationalised story of my controversial tweet contributed to the overall effect. No one could miss the fact that the British National Party is out there campaigning on the streets and making life difficult for those who would cover up such evils and throw the innocent to the jackals. Yet again, people can see we're leading from the front, and big thanks to all the activists who've helped out and make that happen. No sooner was I free from the TV cameras than I had to dash back to the office to write a 60-second speech for the debate on a report from a delegation which had been to see the latest state of play in southern Italy, where the end of the winter is seeing a fresh upsurge in the number of illegal immigrants making the short journey over from Africa. This will be on our website within a few days, so I won't repeat what I've said, other than to mention that I concluded by proposing 3 simple rules to stop the problem in its tracks. The last one was, if you haven't paid in, you don't get a house or a penny in benefits. It's actually quite amazing just how uncomfortable and outraged you can make a gaggle of liberal left idiots in 60 seconds. Do keep your eye open for it. Now a note for your diary. Noon, Saturday 9th of June, Blackpool. We'll be demonstrating outside a new takeaway shop that's linked to the 2 suspects in the Charlene Downs grooming rape and murder case. I hope you can join us in demanding effective police action and a retrial, and encouraging members of the public to lunch on good old traditional fish and chips, rather than on kebabs of unknown provenance. Don't forget, Saturday, 9th of June, Blackpool. Spread the word, and I hope to see you there. Finally, on a lighter note, I wrote notes for this report from the belly of the beast in my flat there late last night. It's already quite warm over here, so the windows are wide open, even gone midnight. So above the distant noise of city traffic, there are yowling cats and fighting urban foxes. It's quite lively out there. There don't seem to be any badgers, who make a most unearthly noise when they scrap at mating season. We have a lot of them at home in Wales. Some years back we were woken by 2 of them rucking and hurling badger abuse at each other just outside the front door. Pulling on a pair of shoes, I ran downstairs, flung open the door, and told them in no uncertain terms where to go. One duly scarpered away over the field, but the other, covered in his or his rival's blood, trundled off into our open garage. I followed, determined to see this intruder off my patch. Mr. Brock got to the far corner and found he'd hit a stone wall. He tried to climb it and fell back. Tried to climb it again and fell back again. Then he turned around. Mr. Brock blinked. I blinked. Then he looked me up and down, bared his teeth, and waddled menacingly towards me. Something in his fixed stare and the bloodstains on his white bits made me remember the claim that a badger can take a man's hand off at the wrist with a single bite. So now I looked up and down and realised that, apart from the shoes, I was stark bollock naked. So I ran for the door, with Mr. Brock in hot pursuit, clearly determined to see this intruder off his patch. Fortunately, this was in the days before we had night vision CCTV, or I fear that some unkind soul would have leaked it onto YouTube. Naked Griffin chased by badger. How far up the end-of-year YouTube chart would that have got? I shall leave you with that thought. If it disturbs your sleep this evening, my apologies. Just don't go out looking for badgers late at night, especially if you're a Labour MP.
World news. Explosions have been the centre of attention in Syria. Bombs have been planted and detonated, killing about 55 people in the country's capital, Damascus. The UN have condemned the breaking of the ceasefire by both sides, although it is reported that the deadly attack was carried out by those who started the uprising against the Syrian government. The killing has been going on for 14 months and is escalating, as the rebels are using the same people and methods of fundamentalist Islam in killing their own people. Is this in the name of democracy? Left-wing propaganda has emerged in the US. While Barack Obama is running around trying to promote same-sex marriages, dirt is being thrown by the media concerning Obama's presidential election opponent, Mitt Romney. They reported that Mitt Romney bullied gays at his elite college prep school in Michigan. John Lauber, who bleached his hair and wore it long, was perpetually teased. Romney apparently cut his hair. Romney cannot recall the incident. Unfortunate though it might have been, their black brothers in the projects don't exactly encourage their gay brothers, do they? I cannot say Obama because his childhood is a set-up. He either grew up in Uganda or Hawaii, not in the projects of the United States. On the bright side for Obama, at least his uncle, Onyango Obama, has now got a driving licence, so he can be legally drunk. Thought for the day. I watched the hundreds of protesters protesting against our austerity measures and felt a little sick. These people should have been in Liverpool protesting against the Muslim grooming gangs, but they are so immersed in self-pity, which seems to be the norm in the UK these days. I, me is the mantra of all and sundry now. These protesters don't know when they are well off. They might have reduced pensions, and at an age which they can get them is now 68, but what the hell? They have jobs at least which supply some sort of pension. They are public sector workers. This section of society has always been fairly well paid and pensions supplied. Does this section include the ridiculous council jobs on offer during the last few years? Dog walking and teaching Muslim women to fish. Do their jobs include the multifaceted, diversity-ridden projects and organisations which are oversupplied and overpaid? If a man can get a job in this country when he is in his 50s to get a part pension in his 60s, let me know. I know many guys who would just like one. Where were these protesters when we needed them? In the front row of the nationalist line at Liverpool? We had our best and most loyal people there, but they could not outnumber the number of self-absorbed and greedy people in London. One man yelled to the TV cameraman words to the effect of, "We do not deserve these cuts." Well, Buster, you do. It was people like you who voted in the Labour government and kept voting them in, even though their fiscal record is toxic, and you seem to be voting that way again. I have no time for the coalition, but they are trying to sort out the complete bleep up that was left by your government, the Labour government. What you sow you shall reap, and you are. Live with it and be grateful you have the power to protest at all. If this was a communist government you would not have the means to take a day off, let alone protest. Now you protesters see yourselves as politically correct and would never vote British National Party. The British National Party would still impose austerity measures at this moment in time because we would have to. Although on a personal level I know what I would do if given the chance. Bearing in mind I am not good with figures, there are a few things that we would need to cut. Money for foreign aid would be cut completely. Withdraw in a timely fashion from the European Union, which would stop immigration from Europe. Stop all immigration immediately. Deport illegal immigrants immediately. This alone would give the government many millions of pounds towards paying off our national debt and enlarging our armed forces and police force. The many millions of pounds spent on even illegal immigrants and their families would be ploughed back into our health service. They are simple and non-political measures, but they will be necessary in the future for whatever government gets in, or the entire country will end up paying foreigners through the nose whilst the indigenous people get poorer and poorer. Or if you want to look at it in a certain way, we will be the result of socialist and multicultural engineering which has been taken to a whole new level. So stop protesting about something that doesn't need protests and start looking at the state of your country. Without what rights you have been allowed to keep temporarily, you would not have a job to protest about, and without a country you would have nothing. Start thinking along nationalist lines, for the better good of your country and its people, and for justice in the face of the largest colonisation Europe has ever seen and is ignoring. And finally, is it paranormal activity? Princess Diana's ghost caught on camera in Glasgow. Some Chinese tourists took a picture of a stained glass window in a church in Glasgow, and when it was played back it revealed an additional picture of a young woman. Michael Cohen, a paranormal enthusiast, has stated it is the ghost of Princess Diana. Scientists tell us that ghosts don't exist, and yet people around the world keep seeing them, he said. To me it does look like a ghost of some sort, but the picture shows a brunette who appears to be wearing a shawl around both arms. To my mind, if it was Princess Di, what was she doing in a Glasgow church? I hope I haunt something a bit more salubrious when I pass hence. The Ritz maybe, with a champers cocktail. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and from me and the team at Radio Britain, we wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend. Arrested on suspicion of murder in death of 5 children in house fire. Labour MP has said that police cannot do their jobs for fear of being labelled racist. Unite Union stands firm behind Labour and the Muslims on trial. Nick Griffin reporting from the belly of the beast. Naked Griffin chased by badger. Islamic fundamentalists bring suicide bombs to Syria. Leftist propaganda family, but the children died of smoke inhalation. Police are reported to be keeping an open mind over the cause of the accident, but have made the arrest in order to secure evidence. The unfortunate word racist is raising its head again in connection with our police force. It was reported that former Labour MP Anne Cryer has said in tabloids that the police couldn't do their job because of racism fears. She was speaking in connection with the trial work in the US, Romney accused of bullying gays at school. Thought for the day: public workers' protests, and the one protest they should have been attending. UK News. It has been reported that the father of the 5 children killed in a house fire in Derby is Mick Philpott. Mr Philpott, who had previously made news for having his wife and mistress live under the same roof. The 54-year-old...
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. Nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 11th of May. Woman had also demanded a bigger council house. The reason given was that he had 2 women and 17 children in a 3-bed semi. The identification was made locally as police revealed that a woman in her 20s had been arrested at a separate address on suspicion of murder after a house fire that started in the early hours of the morning claimed 5 children's lives. Fire crews were at the scene within 3 minutes of being called and managed to rescue all 8 members of the